The bonfire didn't just light the square, it lit the lie. Thornridge called it a claiming ceremony, but everyone knew it was an audit, a public tally of who mattered, who could be traded, who would be raised, who would be left behind. The gathering square had been scraped smooth and stamped flat by generations of boots. Banners hung from the platform's posts, each one stitched with the pack crest in thick silver thread that caught the firelight like wet metal. The air smelled of smoke, pine sap, and a faint bite of frost carried down from the ridge. Naomi Vale stood at the base of the platform with her hands clasped in front of her, so no one could see the tremor in her fingers. She wore the ceremonial white dress she had sewn herself, not because she was sentimental, but because no one in her house could afford the silk the other girls wore. She had made the fabric look expensive anyway. She had stitched silver constellations along the hem in a pattern her father taught her to read when she was a child, because if her life was going to be judged, she wanted at least one detail on her body to say she had been paying attention all along. This night was supposed to be the one clean thing in a life full of compromises. Von Caro was late. That alone was a warning. The crowd's murmurs rose and fell like a tide. Naomi heard her name drift between teeth, not cruelly, not kindly, like a fact they had already turned into certainty. She could feel the eyes of women who had watched her grow up, watched her carry water when her mother's cough got worse, watched her men-torn shirts with thread too thin, watched her still show up on the training yard because pride was the one thing she refused to put down. When the drums stopped, the square sharpened into silence. Vaughn stepped onto the platform as if he had been carved for it. Dark hair pulled back, coat fitted close to his shoulders, the pack crest pinned to his chest like a claim. He looked out at his people and the crowd leaned forward as one organism, hungry for a clean ending. Naomi's chest tightened, not with romance but with relief. Relief that the waiting had finally reached its last step. Then Vaughn turned slightly, and someone climbed the platform beside him. Lysara Ashwin. She didn't glide. She didn't float. She walked like she owned the air she displaced. Crimson silk hugged her body in a way that announced wealth without needing a single word. Gold filigree rested at her throat, and rubies, real rubies, not glass, caught the bonfire's light and threw it back in violent sparks. Her hair was braided in the Western Ridge style, the kind that took servants and time. The kind of braid that said this wasn't a personal choice. It was a move. Naomi didn't move. The first sound that escaped the crowd wasn't cheering. It was confusion trying to disguise itself. Vaughn raised his hands. Pack of Thornridge. His voice carried cleanly across the square. He had practiced it. Naomi could hear it in the way he placed his breath. I've called you all here to present my chosen mate, the future Luna of our pack. For a fraction of a second, his eyes found Naomi. In that fraction, she saw apology, guilt, and something colder underneath, calculation. The look of a man who had already justified what he was about to do, and had only come to get the witnesses. Then he looked away. Lysara Ashwin has accepted my claim. The world didn't tilt. Naomi did. Her hearing narrowed until all she could make out was the crack of the bonfire and the small, humiliating sounds people make when they think they're watching history. A sharp gasp, a muffled laugh, her mother's breath catching behind her like a snagged thread. Vaughn continued speaking. The Ashwin Alliance strengthens our borders. It reinforces... Naomi stepped forward so hard her foot hit the platform step with a slap that cut through his words. The crowd went silent again, not because they respected her, but because they smelled a scene. Vaughn's head turned, irritation flashing quickly across his face like a spark that got smothered. Naomi spoke before her mind could stop her. 3 nights ago, you whispered my name into my shoulder and told me to start thinking like a Luna. A sound rippled through the square. Not outrage, interest. Lysara's smile tightened. It didn't vanish. It sharpened. Vaughn's voice dropped low. Naomi, not here. Where then? Naomi didn't raise her volume, but she made sure every word landed. In your room? With the door shut? In the dark? Where you can pretend you didn't say anything at all? Vaughn's jaw flexed. This is politics. It's convenience, Naomi said. Politics is just the word you use when you want people to stop asking which part of you is rotten. A few heads snapped toward each other. A few men shifted uncomfortably. Naomi felt it, that thin line between social order and public entertainment, and she was standing on it barefoot. Vaughn's eyes flared. You're embarrassing yourself. Naomi's throat tightened, but her spine didn't bend. No, I'm embarrassing you. There's a difference. She looked to Lysara and let her gaze linger on the woman's hand resting on Vaughn's arm like ownership. Did he tell you about the promises? Naomi asked. voice calm. Did he tell you he already chose me until you arrived with your father's signatures and your coin? Lysara's lips parted slightly. She recovered instantly. The king of your little square isn't a king to anyone who matters, she said smoothly, as if she were offering advice. He did what he had to. Vaughn's expression flickered. Shame. Irritation. Then the shame got buried. Naomi nodded once, as if she had expected that answer. He did what he wanted, she corrected. And now I'm doing what I want. She stepped down from the platform. 100 eyes tracked her like she was prey. Naomi walked through them anyway, past girls whose faces had softened into pity, past men whose mouths had opened but whose tongues had decided they weren't brave enough, past her mother, whose hand reached for her sleeve and missed by inches. Naomi didn't stop. She didn't allow herself that mercy. She kept walking until the bonfire's roar became a dull glow behind tree trunks, and the square's silence was replaced by the forest's own language, wind through needles, distant owl call, the soft churn of dirt under hurried footsteps. Only when the darkness fully swallowed her did Naomi let her knees give. She dropped beside an old oak that had been there before the pack ever learned the word, Luna. Her white dress pooled in the dirt like surrender. Her chest hitched, and the sob that tore out of her wasn't pretty, wasn't controlled, wasn't anything she could use against anyone. She pressed her palms to the bark and forced air into her lungs like she was trying to reassemble her body. Then a voice cut through the black. He's a fool. Naomi's head snapped up. Her wolf stirred, teeth rising under skin. A figure stood between the trees, just outside the reach of the moonlight, motionless in a way that didn't read like fear. Tall, too still, as if the forest had arranged itself around him. Naomi pushed up to her feet. Show yourself. He stepped forward. Moonlight caught his face and turned it into a weapon. Black coat, broad shoulders, hair swept back from a face built in sharp planes, cheekbones and jaw that looked like they belonged on old coins. His eyes weren't pale gray. They were silver, reflective, like molten metal cooled into glass. The kind of eyes that didn't just watch. They measured. Naomi's breath caught, not because she was impressed, because something in her wolf recognized danger that didn't belong to any pack hierarchy she'd ever learned. You were watching, she said, voice firm. Yes, you followed me. I waited, he corrected, calm as stone. You ran. Naomi's hands clenched at her sides. Why are you here? He tilted his head slightly, studying her like he was mapping her weaknesses. Because I heard there was a woman in Thornridge who had nothing left to lose. Naomi laughed once. It came out bitter. Congratulations. You found her. Now leave. That's not what I found, he said. Naomi's eyes narrowed. Then what did you find? He took one slow step closer. Not rushed. Not predatory in the obvious way. Predatory in the patient way. I found a woman who didn't beg, he said. A woman who spoke the truth when silence would have been safer. A woman who walked away from a platform instead of collapsing on it. Naomi's mouth tightened. You talk like you've been rehearsing. I don't rehearse, he said, and the words carried weight like an oath. Naomi forced her breath to steady. Who are you? I am someone with a problem, he replied, and you are someone with a solution. Naomi's laugh turned sharp. You're insane. Possibly, he said, and for the first time something almost like amusement flickered in his eyes. It vanished immediately. He reached into his coat and withdrew a ring. Black iron, no gemstone, no polish, etched with symbols Naomi didn't recognize. The markings looked too old to belong to this world, the kind of script carved into ruins. Naomi stared at it. What is that? An exit, he said. Naomi's chest tightened. From what? From Thornridge, he said simply. From their whispers. From their pity. From the slow death they'll feed you by inches until you stop fighting. Naomi's eyes hardened. And what do you get? He turned the ring between his fingers. A wife. The word hit the air and didn't dissolve. Naomi waited for the laugh, the twist, the cruelty. None came. You don't even know my name, she said slowly. I know enough, he replied. Then say it, Naomi said. Say what you know. His gaze held hers like a hand on a throat. Your mother's illness worsens in winter. The healers cost more than your house earns. Vaughn promised you protection and withdrew it in front of witnesses. After tonight, Thornridge will treat you like a cautionary tale. Each sentence landed like a stone. Naomi's throat tightened. If you came to mock me, I came to offer you a solution. He cut in, calm. A solution to my humiliation. A solution to your future. he corrected. Naomi's wolf prowled under her skin. She was alone in the woods with a stranger who moved like he belonged in darkness. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but another thought cut through the noise. Her mother, coughing into cloth, smiling through weakness, telling Naomi it was fine. Naomi's jaw set. "What do you want?" He extended his hand slightly. The ring rested on his palm. "I need a wife who is not bound to any counsel, any pact, any family line that can hold her like leverage," he said. "Someone who can't be bought because she's already seen what buying looks like." Naomi stared at his open hand. "And you pay me with healers and freedom." "Yes, and if I say no." He didn't blink. "Then I leave." Naomi's breath came shallow. "What's your name?" "You learn it after you decide," he said. "That makes no sense." "It will," he replied. "If you know what I am, it will influence you. I need your choice without that weight." Naomi's lips tightened. "You want me to marry you without knowing who you are. I want you to choose the offer," he said, "not the title." Naomi looked down at the iron ring. It was plain, but it didn't feel cheap. It felt ancient, like a key. "One condition," she said, voice low. "If this is a trap, if you're cruel, if you lied, if I decide this was a mistake, I leave." His expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. Recognition, respect. "Agreed," he said. "No pursuit, no retaliation. You have my word." "Words are cheap," Naomi said. "Mine aren't," he replied, and the certainty in his voice made her pause. She reached out. The iron was warm. Her fingers closed around it and heat bloomed across her palm like sun-warmed stone. The symbols flared faintly under moonlight. Naomi sucked in a breath. "What? It seals a vow," he said calmly. "Binding, until released by mutual consent." Naomi's eyes snapped to his. "You could have said that before I touched it." He watched her steadily. "Would you have taken it if I did?" Naomi held his gaze for a long beat, then slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. Naomi's pulse hammered in her ears. "It's done," she said. "Yes. Now tell me your name." He stepped closer, close enough that Naomi could smell pine and cold air and something deeper, like a forest untouched by human fire. "My name," he said, voice low, "is Kale Ardent." Naomi's breath hitched. The name didn't feel like a name. It felt like a warning. "And?" she demanded. His silver eyes held hers without apology. "And I am the Lykan King." Naomi's world stopped. Lykan, not werewolf, not pack alpha. The old bloodline, the first wolves, the ones beyond council law, the ones parents used as threats in bedtime stories. Naomi's wolf surged forward inside her like a tidal wave. Kale's composure cracked, just for an instant, as if he felt the same snap of something unseen tightening between them. "That," he said roughly, voice losing its calm, "was not part of the plan." Naomi's ring pulsed against her finger like a second heartbeat. Mate. The bond locked into place before she could deny it, and the forest, which had been silent, suddenly felt like it was watching. They left Thornridge before the sky even finished turning. Kale's horse waited deeper in the trees, a massive black stallion that looked less like an animal and more like a shadow given muscle. Naomi mounted behind him without ceremony, hands gripping his coat as the wind cut sharp across her cheeks. She didn't ask how he'd traveled 3 days and arrived at the exact edge of her humiliation. She didn't ask why a king would wait in a forest like a thief, because the bond kept answering questions she wasn't ready to name. It hummed beneath her skin, a low, steady heat that flared every time her body pressed against his back. Not romance, not softness, recognition, territory. Something ancient calling her by a language she had never learned. Kale did not speak as they rode. His body stayed rigid, controlled, as if he was holding himself inside a cage built from willpower. Naomi noticed the tension in his hands on the reins, the way his jaw locked whenever she shifted behind him. Dawn broke as they crested a ridge. Naomi forgot to breathe. A fortress carved directly into the mountainside rose before them. Black stone fused to the cliff, as if the mountain had grown teeth. Silver spires pierced the morning mist. Waterfalls poured down the rock face in long sheets, catching light and turning it into blades. Banners bearing a crescent moon snapped in the wind like warnings. Below the fortress, a city sprawled across the valley. Terraced roofs, smoke from morning fires, streets that looked like veins from this distance. Naomi had lived her entire life inside a border pack that measured wealth in sacks of grain. This was something else. Kale finally spoke, voice rough from disuse. Valdrin. Naomi swallowed. It's real. It's home, Cale said, tone flat. Or it will be. They descended into the city, and Naomi became aware of eyes before she saw faces. People stopped in the streets. Merchants paused with hands mid-gesture. Children were pulled behind skirts. They weren't staring at Cale. They were staring at her. Naomi sat straighter, chin high. The white dress had been replaced by traveling clothes Cale had produced without explanation. Dark wool, warm, plain. The iron ring still sat on her finger like a bruise that wouldn't fade. Whispers followed them. Not loud, controlled. The kind of whisper that assumes it owns the space. Border blood. Common. Why is she behind him? What did she offer? What did he lose? Cale's horse moved through the crowd as if it had a right to silence. Guards at the gate snapped to attention the moment they saw him. The fortress doors opened without a word. Inside, the air turned colder. Corridors stretched long and severe, lit by torches burning with an unnatural silver flame. The stone underfoot was polished so smooth Naomi could see her reflection distorted in it. It made her look thinner, smaller. A woman waited in the entrance hall like she'd been carved there. Steel gray hair pulled back tight, high cheekbones, eyes so pale they looked colorless. Her posture was perfect, her face controlled. "Your Majesty," she said, dipping just enough to be respectful without appearing submissive. Her gaze slid to Naomi, the smallest curl of her lip, barely visible, but sharp. "So the rumors are true." Cale dismounted and helped Naomi down. His hand lingered at her waist, not tender, not gentle, possessive in a way that felt like defense. Naomi's wolf answered with a low pulse of heat. "Lady Morvain," Cale said, voice polite, with something dangerous underneath. Morvain's eyes stayed on Naomi. "The council will want an explanation. The council will receive one when I decide," Cale replied. Pleasant. Morvain's composure didn't crack, but the air tightened. Cale's gaze flicked to Naomi. "My wife needs rest. Prepare the Queen's chambers." Queen's chambers. Naomi's head spun. 12 hours ago she had been standing in front of a bonfire with her life stripped bare. Now a king had called her wife in a fortress that smelled like power. Morvain's mouth curved. The smile did not reach her eyes. "Of course, Your Majesty." Then she looked at Naomi and spoke as if she were addressing a child she didn't like. "Welcome to Valdrin, my queen." The title dripped with venom. Naomi returned the smile slowly. "Thank you. I'm sure we'll become well acquainted." Morvain's eyes flickered. Surprise, or recalculation. The first line had been drawn. The Queen's chambers were larger than Naomi's entire childhood home. Vaulted ceilings painted with constellations. A bed draped in midnight silk. A copper tub filled with steaming water. Rose petals floating across the surface like someone had staged softness. Naomi stood in the center of it and felt out of place, like she had stepped into a story written for someone else. A knock sounded. A young woman entered. Warm brown skin, kind eyes. She dipped into a curtsy that looked practiced but not mocking. "I'm Thessaly," she said. "His Majesty assigned me as your attendant." Her smile stayed gentle. "You must be exhausted." Exhausted didn't cover it, but Naomi didn't show weakness to strangers. "I'm fine," Naomi said. Thessaly's smile didn't fade. "Then perhaps you'd like to be fine in the bath." An hour later, Naomi sat by the fire in a soft gray robe, while Thessaly brushed her hair in steady strokes. The rhythm should have soothed her. Instead, it felt like time passing without her permission. "Can I ask you something?" Naomi said. "Of course, my queen," Thessaly replied. "Why does everyone look at me like I committed a crime?" Thessaly paused for the smallest moment, then resumed brushing. "The court expected His Majesty to marry Lady Seren Ashwin." Naomi's stomach tightened. Ashwin. Like Lysara. Thessaly met her eyes in the mirror. Seren is Lysara's older sister. An alliance negotiated for years. Naomi's pulse sharpened. "So Morvain, Lady Morvain is Serene's aunt," Thessaly said quietly, "and the head of the King's Council." Pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Cale hadn't just married Naomi to avoid a political match. He had declared war on the faction that thought it owned him, and Naomi stood directly in the line of fire. "I need to speak with the king," Naomi said. She found Cale in his study, a massive room lined with maps and ancient books. He stood by the window, staring out at mountains like they were enemies. "You knew," Naomi said without preamble. "You used me to dodge an alliance." Cale turned. In daylight, he looked older. Not in years, in weight. Shadows sat beneath his eyes as if sleep avoided him on purpose. "Yes," he said simply. Naomi's jaw tightened. You didn't think to mention that before you bound me with a ring. Cale's gaze held hers. Would it have changed your answer? Naomi opened her mouth to say yes, then stopped. Would it have? She saw Thornridge again. The platform. Vaughn's eyes sliding away. Lysara's hand on his arm. Her mother's breath catching. She hadn't been choosing between Cale and a normal life. She had been choosing between Cale and being slowly erased. I deserved the truth, Naomi said instead. All of it. Cale was silent for a long moment. Then he gestured to a chair by the fire. Sit. Naomi sat. Cale spoke without dramatics. The Ashwin influence. Morvaine's control. The pressure to marry Seren. A woman he had met twice and despised instantly. Not because she was cruel, but because she was aligned, bought, positioned. And beneath it all, something darker. Council members vanish, Cale said quietly. Advisors replaced. Information leaks beyond the border. Someone is moving against me. I don't know who. Naomi's eyes narrowed. But you suspected Morvaine. I suspected a faction, Cale corrected. Morvaine is the face of it. And you married a stranger to avoid giving them the throne. I married someone with no ties, Cale said. Someone who could not be bought. His eyes found hers. Someone I could trust. Naomi's breath caught. You don't know me. I know you could have begged Vaughn to reconsider. You didn't. You could have let humiliation crush you in front of your pack. You didn't. You walked away. His voice softened slightly. That tells me more than courtship ever could. The bond hummed between them, warm and insistent, like a thread pulling her closer. Naomi forced herself to remain still. Morvaine will come after me, Naomi said. Yes, Cale replied, and you will protect me. Something fierce moved across his face. With everything I have, Naomi's throat tightened. Why? Kyle stepped closer to the chair, knelt, brought himself to her level. His silver eyes held something raw she hadn't expected. Because you are mine now, he said roughly, and I protect what is mine. The words should have felt like a cage. Instead, they felt like armor. Before Naomi could answer, the door burst open. Thessaly stood in the doorway, face pale. Your Majesty, there's been an attack. Lord Vashin is dead. Cale stood instantly, blade appearing in his hand like it had always been there. Thessaly's voice trembled. They're saying the Queen did it. Naomi's stomach dropped. She had been in the castle less than a day, and someone had already decided her role in their story. Scapegoat. The throne room filled with hostile faces, nobles in dark velvet, council members with polished smiles. Morvaine seated at the head like a judge who had been waiting for the defendant to arrive. Cale stood beside Naomi, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. Morvaine spoke calmly. A witness saw a woman in gray fleeing the corridor. Lord Vashin was poisoned. Naomi stepped forward. Half your servants wear gray. Morvaine's eyes remained cold. A servant's clothing does not make a queen innocent. Naomi held her gaze. Then bring proof. Bring the poison. Bring the weapon. Bring anything other than a rumor dressed as law. A murmur rippled through the room. Not support. Interest. Naomi could feel it. The court recalculating whether she was weak. Morvaine's mouth curved. Bold words from a woman who arrived yesterday and married our king within hours. Naomi didn't flinch. Bolder words from a woman whose niece expected to wear this ring. Silence slammed down. Morvaine's composure cracked for a fraction. A flash of fury, then smoothed instantly. Cale's voice cut like steel. Enough. His gaze swept the council. My wife is not a murderer. This investigation will proceed properly. Until then, no one will speak against the Queen. The council dispersed, but Naomi saw the looks they exchanged, the nods. This wasn't over. It had just started. Morvaine's trial didn't happen in a single day. Power doesn't collapse cleanly. It fractures in layers. For 3 days, the fortress turned into a machine that processed betrayal. Prisoners were dragged into stone rooms and questioned until their stories broke. Letters were recovered from hidden compartments. Payments traced. Names whispered into the ears of men who had sworn loyalty, and now had to choose whether their oath meant anything. Naomi watched Cale move through it all like a man held upright by spite and discipline. He didn't rage. He didn't perform. He simply cut away rot. When Morvaine was finally brought into the council chamber, her hands bound, her posture remained flawless. Even in chains, she carried herself like a woman who believed the world should still open doors for her. Cale sat at the head of the chamber. Naomi stood beside him, not behind. Morvain's eyes flicked to Naomi's ring. A flash of contempt crossed her face. "A border blood queen," she said softly. "You brought mud into marble." Naomi smiled. "Not pretty, not kind. You built your throne out of other people's silence," she replied. "Mud holds better than lies." Morvain's composure cracked for a heartbeat. Evidence piled. Witnesses confessed. A hired blade admitted to poisoning Lord Vashon and planting the rumor about a woman in gray. The coded letter Thessaly found became the spine of the case. Morvain's network unspooled across half the noble houses, a web of favors and threats that had been tightening for decades. Saren Ashwin arrived in the chamber with her chin lifted, expecting to be treated as royalty. She left with her face wet and her hands trembling. When confronted with her aunt's treason, Saren's voice broke into hysterical denials. She insisted she knew nothing. She insisted she had been promised a marriage and had never asked how it would be achieved. Kale didn't shout. He didn't need to. He spoke one sentence, quiet and lethal. "Escort her to the gate and ensure she never returns." Saren was sent back to Western Ridge in disgrace, her entourage reduced to a handful of guards who looked relieved to be leaving alive. The summit delegations departed within days, their oaths renewed, their suspicions redirected. The border pacts were cleared publicly, their leaders given formal apology and compensation. The realm didn't heal instantly, but it stopped bleeding. On the fourth day, Kyle addressed the full court in the throne room. Naomi stood beside him, dressed in deep blue velvet, iron ring gleaming. "This woman," Kyle said, voice carrying to every corner, "arrived with nothing but her courage. She stood in this court and faced down enemies without flinching. She stood between me and death without hesitation. She saved this dominion." The court that had whispered common now watched Naomi with something closer to caution, not because they liked her, because they had finally understood she didn't break. Later that evening, the gates opened for an unexpected delegation. Naomi recognized Thornridge's banner before she saw the faces. Von Kara walked into Valdrin like a man entering his own sentencing. He looked older than he had 2 weeks ago. Not from time, from consequences. Kale moved to intercept, but Naomi touched his arm. "Let me," she said quietly. Kale's eyes held hers for a long beat. Then he stepped back. Naomi met Vaughn in the entrance hall beneath torchlight that made everything look sharper than it should. Vaughn stopped a few steps away, as if the floor itself could accuse him. "Naomi," he said, voice strained. "I came to see what you threw away," Naomi finished, tone neutral. Vaughn flinched. "I made a mistake." "You made a choice," Naomi said. "Mistakes are accidents." Vaughn's hands flexed. "Lysera left me." Naomi didn't react. Vaughn's mouth twisted. "The moment she heard about your marriage, she broke the engagement. Said there was no point tying herself to Thornridge when the real power was here." A bitter laugh escaped him. "She never wanted me. She wanted a step." Naomi studied him with a strange clarity. There was no satisfaction in it. No vindictive thrill. Just the quiet certainty of distance. "I'm sorry," Naomi said. And she meant it in the way you're sorry for someone who walked into a wall after ignoring a warning sign. "But it doesn't change anything." Vaughn swallowed hard. "If I could go back." "You can't." Naomi stepped closer, not threatening, not soft, just close enough that he had to look at her properly. "And even if you could," she said, voice low, "I wouldn't want you to." Vaughn's brows knit. "Naomi, because that night," she continued, "when you chose her, you set me free." Vaughn's breath hitched as if the words struck something tender. Naomi glanced toward the corridor where Kale watched, his posture controlled, his eyes bright with something he refused to name in front of others. "You sent me into the woods," Naomi said, looking back to Vaughn. "And in those woods I found something I never knew I was missing." Vaughn's voice cracked. "I never meant to hurt you." "You didn't mean to protect me either," Naomi replied. Vaughn's shoulders sagged. "So that's it?" "That's it," Naomi said. Vaughn stared at her, searching her face like there was still a hidden door he could force open. Naomi gave him none. She turned to leave. Vaughn spoke behind her, desperate. "Do you love him?" Naomi didn't stop walking. She didn't look back, but her voice carried cleanly in the hall. "I chose him," she said. "That's the only answer that matters." She reached Kale halfway down the corridor. Kale's hand found hers without hesitation. His fingers wrapped around hers like a promise he didn't need to speak. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. Naomi nodded once. "Better than all right." Kale's gaze searched her face. "You look steady," Naomi exhaled. "I received word this morning. Kale's posture sharpened. From Thornridge. No, Naomi said softly. From my mother. Kale's eyes tightened. Naomi felt his grip on her hand shift. Subtle, careful. Her fever broke, Naomi said. The healers arrived in time. For the first time since the summit, Kale's control visibly loosened. Not in weakness, in relief. Naomi squeezed his hand. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Spring came to Valdrin like a held breath released. Snow melted off peaks. Flowers erupted across terrace gardens. The fortress, which had always felt like stone and strategy, began to smell faintly of new growth. 3 months of peace settled across the Dominion. Not perfect, not easy, but quieter. Naomi learned the rhythm of court life, the meetings, the petitions, the way power moved through rooms in silence before it ever spoke aloud. Kale learned her rhythm too. He learned she rose early without complaint, that she listened more than she spoke, that she didn't waste words on people who hadn't earned them, that when a noble tried to insult her, she didn't lash out. She asked one sharp question and let them drown in their own answer. One evening, Kyle found her on the battlements, their place now, watching the sunset bleed gold across the mountains. I've been thinking about the night in the woods, he said. Naomi didn't look at him. You think about it often. Kale stepped beside her, close but not crowding. I told myself I needed a political solution, he said. A wife with no connections, no complications, someone more vain couldn't control. Naomi finally turned slightly, and Kyle's silver eyes held hers, rawer than they had any right to be. And I was lying to myself from the moment I saw you. Naomi's throat tightened. Kyle took her hands. I love you, he said, voice rough, not because of the bond, not because fate forced us together. I love you because you are brave and stubborn and unwilling to be owned by anyone. Naomi's eyes stung. She didn't let the tears fall, not out of pride, out of focus. Kale continued, words careful like he had been holding them in his teeth for weeks. Every morning I wake up terrified you'll realize you deserve better. Naomi's breath hitched. And every night, Kale said, I go to sleep grateful you haven't decided to leave. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a second ring. Not iron. Silver twisted delicately around a deep blue stone that caught the dying light like captured starfire. Marry me again, he said. Not as strangers, not as a bargain. Choose me now, with open eyes. Naomi laughed softly, the sound breaking something in her chest. You're asking me to marry you when we're already married. I'm asking you to choose me the way I choose you, Kale replied. Every day. Naomi didn't answer with words. She pulled him down by his collar and kissed him. Kale made a sound like restraint breaking. His arms wrapped around her, holding her like the world could try to take her again. When they separated, his forehead rested against hers. Stay, he breathed. Not because of duty, because you want to. Naomi's fingers traced his jaw. Ask me again when it's quiet, she said softly. When we aren't still living inside knives. Kale's mouth curved slightly. And if it's never quiet? Naomi smiled. Then we build our quiet. The ceremony was held under the full moon in the castle gardens, not in the throne room with its politics and polished masks. Spring flowers bloomed across the grass like someone had spilled color deliberately. Thessaly stood beside Naomi, beaming so hard it looked like light. Kale's most trusted guards formed an honor circle, their faces softer than Naomi had ever seen them. Naomi wore deep blue silk that made her eyes luminous. Kale wore black with silver trim, the crescent crest at his throat. The iron ring still circled Naomi's finger. The silver ring joined it. They spoke vows they wrote themselves. Naomi didn't talk about fate. She didn't talk about destiny. She spoke about choice. I came to you with nothing, Naomi said, voice steady. Betrayed in public. Dismissed like I didn't matter. You gave me freedom when you could have demanded obedience. You gave me a door when every other door was closed. Kale's eyes glistened. I came to you looking for a solution, Kale said. I found my home. When their lips met beneath moonlight, it didn't feel like rescue. It felt like ownership of her own story. Later, tangled together in silver sheets, Naomi traced the lines of Kale's face. Tell me something I don't know, she murmured. Kale smiled, rare and unguarded. That night in the woods, he said. I almost walked away. Naomi's brow lifted. Why didn't you? Kale kissed her softly. Because you looked up through tears and still had fire in your eyes. Naomi's mouth curved. I wasn't broken. No, Kale agreed, voice low. You were waiting to burn. Naomi leaned into him, watching dawn break over the mountains through their window. Somewhere far below, the realm slept. And for the first time in her life, Naomi didn't feel like she was waiting for permission to exist. She had taken it. Fair trade, she thought, letting the words settle into her bones like truth. Everything.